Hello, everyone. I am going to hope you've all been able to access. And Hillary, maybe you can give me some updates here and let me know how many folks have joined this meeting, which is starting promptly at 3 o'clock.
Looks like they're trickling in still, Kiki. We have, it shows 23, 24 participants. So I think it's letting them in as we go.
Okay.
To 26, 27.
Can you hear me okay? Is my audio good?
Sounds good.
Yes, good here.
Okay. Okay, well, first of all, thank you all again for being here. It's been a very, very busy last few weeks. The work group got together as planned. I'm going to drag out my welcome because I know we still have some people connecting, and I want to make sure everybody has an opportunity to be involved. I'm going to do a little housekeeping and mention a couple things. One is that any of the work group members, especially if you're an elected or if you do regular reports to your councils, I received actually 2 different phone calls from 2 different regional council members who really had a huge misunderstanding of what this group is doing and thought that this group was organizing a way to acquire prairie land. So that's one person, and the other person thought that this group was going to be dealing with low-income housing. So, you know, I know that people just grab a soundbite and they pick up one thing, but I would really encourage the work group and all of the advisory group members that if you don't understand what the mission and the focus is, that you actually, go to this KMPO site and read those details. My email address is there. Please give me a jingle, drop me a line. I'd be happy to explain our progress and get anyone up to speed and clarify any questions. Further to that, I've been asked a couple times to do podcasts or intermittent updates. I'm not sure I'm ready to do that, but I wanted to let you know I'm considering that, and we'll be talking to the work group about that at our next meeting. I wanted to mention this. I did do a little presentation to the Joint Government Issues Committee for North Idaho Building Contractors Association, just to get them up to speed as to what this is all about and what our progress has been to date. And it was well received. They took good notes and had some good questions. There was one thing that was brought up was, why is KMPO leading this? Just to clear that up for everyone in the advisory group membership, KMPO is not leading this. They are a partner just like everyone else. The reason that KMPO's website is used is that I contacted them and they were gracious enough to volunteer time and the space to house the information so that there'd be a consistent location for all of the resources. So I just want to review that with the advisory group members, that's how this operation, it's not a funded program. It's not even an actual program. It's a volunteer partnership of all these organizations who are here to do what our citizens want, and that's address housing and growth issues and provide information and be a resource. So I wanted to clear those 2 things up real quick. Another thing is that during some recent town hall meetings and other conversations, it was brought up that there were errors or mistakes on the frequently asked questions. I'd reached out to a couple of people who made those comments and I haven't heard anything back. But if anyone knows of a discrepancy in those FAQs that they think needs to be corrected, please just reach out to me. I will go through all the proper channels and make sure that every bit of information under those FAQs is accurate. So that is something that's important. If there are new questions that your group has come up with and want to have listed there, that is not a finite document. We'd be happy to add to that FAQ section at any point. Another piece of information that came up at one of the meetings I was in, and this is regarding the housing portion, but this was back in 08 or 09, another regional group, and Katie Brody was involved in that. Her and a number of other folks, I believe Carrie Thorson, Charlie Renz, quite a few people had gotten together to deal with the affordable housing issues. That is what I have learned, and I'm just sharing with you, is that that was the precursor to what became the North Idaho Housing Coalition, which now is, it's still in existence, and there are some other advisory group members that are tagged into that. So I'm just sharing that piece of information because for this advisory group to share with your constituents and your membership, that there are many times these working groups have gotten together and have produced good things that have come out of this for the community. And we don't want to reinvent the wheel, do something that's already been done. So those things are already out there. Another thing that occurred, I had done some research and I had contacted realtors, actually a realtor who's on the association in Lakewood, Colorado. And just for reference, there was an ordinance, and David, I can't remember if it was an ordinance or if it was a county, how that came about.
It was the city ordinance.
Was a city ordinance. Okay, and so a couple things I just wanted to mention, because this is research from our last conversations that I'm just moving forward and sharing with the group. David, would you help me out with this a bit? I wanted to tell you that the conversation I had with the realtor there is, they locally call it the crash test dummy of ordinances. And so they're waiting to see what happens. It's fairly new. And the gist is it limited building permits to a percentage of what the current housing properties were. If I remember that, that's what the ordinance did. And it caused a couple of things to happen. One is that any property owner, it appears anyway, that a property owner that could pulled a building permit and pretty much flooded their city staff with work up until 2022 to try to just process the building permits that were pulled prior to that ordinance coming in effect. And so it's very much a wait and see as to how that's going to affect that community. I'm bringing that up because we had mentioned that in work group. It's been floated in the community as an example of something that could be tried here. And so this group is just vetting out resources and putting out information as to what would happen in that kind of a situation. So that's a test case we're looking at, keeping it, kind of monitoring what's going on there. There was some other data that's been compiled on comparisons from that community to our community that tell a bigger story in context of how dramatically different those communities are. So as we come together, we may ask the advisory group if they want to see more on how that comes together and post a research paper maybe to the website later on. So that's kind of some research that's been done there. I'll touch base real quickly on the moratorium conversation. As most of this community who's involved in this knows that was it Nampa or Caldwell? Sorry, anybody? Passed a moratorium, Caldwell? Passed a moratorium based on just recent legislation that put some caps on property taxes and some other things that was pushed through real quickly at the end of the session. So a couple things on that. There's a great article that the Idaho Statesman came out with, and I think it was in today's paper. I'm going to forward that to Kelly at KMPO right after this meeting and have the link to a PDF for that article. It explained a lot about how that House bill came about, what its potential effect is, what a bunch of different entities are saying about it. And the reality is most everyone who's in the municipality business right now knows that it's a wait and see to see how that affects everyone. I wanted to let everyone know that article is available. I thought it was a good one and can be posted under our additional resources there. So did anyone else have anything they wanted to add on that from the working group? Okay, So I'm just running through a whole bunch of different items that have been kind of pinged on since our last advisory group meeting, and then making sure that we get back to our agenda. So the first item on our agenda, that was kind of some updates that I got added to in there. So I'm really trying to give the advisory group and the working group as much information as I can about what's going on during the course of what this group does. The poll question that was our last next steps task item was, the number one item was a collaborative effort on preservation of prairie space. So a couple things have occurred since then, and that is Melissa and her team put together a map and a hierarchy list of some large property owners on the prairie. I have talked with a number of large landowners out on the prairie and done some more research on what some potential options can be. I don't have a solution to propose, but I did want to tell you that as I go through each one of the requests from citizens, I want to share under the frequently asked questions are, how we manage growth, and an excellent white paper that the county put together has some plans in it on the KMPO website. And that is one of the issues it addresses is open space on the prairie. I'm also going to share with you kind of just personally that there was another great open space that a number of years back, people really wanted to preserve and not have developed. And what the people did is form a foundation called the Tubbs Hill Foundation, and they raised money from the community, and then they bought Tubbs Hill and they transferred it to the city. That is the easiest, and frankly, if this region wants open space to be preserved for park recreation use or whatever, that is the easiest step from A to B, is to have it purchased and have the citizens agree to fund it as a park. The Jacqueline Company is not opposed to selling their land for that purpose and would stay involved in conversations if there was a regional group that formed for the purpose of creating that. David, I understand that someone from the county had approached them at one point about transferring some of that land. And maybe, I don't know how much information you know or could share about that, or if that's something we want to put in a summary report as we move on with what we're going to do on this, answering the questions to the public about preserving open space on the prairie.
Kiki, I'm sorry, I don't actually know anything about that.
Okay, that's no problem.
I could probe the county commissioner's office and see what they know.
I don't know. I know that my calls, like I said, I just pick up the phone and go straight to the source, and they had said, and I may have had it wrong. It may have been someone from this. No, they thought it was somebody from the county who came to them and asked if they would be open to that. So I'm going to have ongoing conversations with them.
Yeah.
And I will tell you that the Jacqueline Company has been around for a number of years, for 40 years. They've done a tremendous amount of master planning with the land that they own. It's private property, it's not public. And they are open to any conversations with the community that can create community good, but they're not going to give their property away. So that's I wouldn't expect that anybody would think that anybody who owned private property would be willing to just hand it over to a group for nothing. So that's where we're at with them. I wanted to let you guys know that I had those conversations, and then perhaps Melissa or Hillary, can you share for the group that map or yes, who do we have there? Mike
Hill. Yes.
Thank you, Hillary, for fixing my issues that I was
You're
having.
welcome.
There was a group that came to Rathdrum City Council and presented an idea of having a recreational area. And their idea was, talking about making like a sports complex type of, large open area. And they had a really neat presentation. They're willing to come to this group and make the same presentation. And, from the city of Rathdrum, our response was that this seemed like it would be something that would be better on a county-wide initiative as opposed to just the city of Rathdrum. And I'm not sure if that's where your comment was about the recreation district might have come from.
Great, Mike, thank you. That just segues right into the next piece of the conversation. I also talked with Lauren Scarcello, and some of you know that name. He's a little further out there, but he also had mentioned that he would be willing to come and talk to this group, the full advisory group via Zoom, and do, he has some large acre parcels, but he would be willing to share some ideas and talk about some ways that he could continue to keep his land undeveloped, and share with us some things that I'm not positive as to what they all are, so I'm a little hesitant into putting words in his mouth. But that was the question that I have to this group, and it may even be something that we want to ask the advisory group is, do we want to have presenters come into this subject and talk about, if they are land holders, what it would take and what kinds of things they would be interested in seeing us look at. So there's a question for the working group, and I'm not sure where we want to go with that, but Mike, that really helps me with what that, tying up what that piece of the information on who presented parks was. So having said that, maybe Hillary or Melissa, do you want to talk about this shared tier analysis that we started?
Melissa, I don't know if you want to kind of give an intro. I can walk us through the different pages. And I do have that summary of the property owner's acreage as well, that I could share that page in addition.
Yeah, I certainly can. I told Hillary earlier that I have to be on the phone here in just a second instead of the computer, because I have to have an appointment to get to. So I can certainly walk through it. Did you pull that last, were you able to pull in the one that I sent you not too long ago, Hillary, or is it?
Yes, I believe this is that one that on the last page. Sorry for scrolling.
Okay, so we just kind of looked at ownership out there in the shared tier, and we looked at different areas, how big the parcels were, and if they were adjacent to one another, if they were common ownership, just kind of looking at who owned what. This is this last slide here. The properties that are outlined kind of in a dark blue are owned by the city of Post Falls. And then the ones that are outlined, those there. And then the ones that are, those smaller ones that are outlined in the dark red, those are owned by the city of Rathdrum. And then when we go to the spreadsheet, if the reason the city of Rathdrum ones aren't shown in the spreadsheet is because they're now annexed into the city of Rathdrum. So we were kind of looking at ones that were still in that shared tier area that are out in the county still in the area of city impact. Does that kind of make sense? So it showed that, like Jacqueline was one of the highest land owners acreage wise out there. City of Post Falls is right up there too. I mean, right, they own quite a bit. That WKLV owns also quite a lot. And then they own property that's in the city of Hayden too, that's out by the airport. So I think, isn't that the Meyer family? Is that who that is?
Yes.
I think that by looking at this, there's opportunities out there if people have relationships to start asking those kinds of questions to see if there might be an opportunity. I think that what Hillary was what Kiki was talking about is the big one though. You have to have a way to buy it,
And I
So-
think that just to be clear, and I want to make sure that all groups who are attending, that is not what this group does. If
Sure.
this group is here to
Yeah,
provide
this is-
information and who they are and do some legwork to provide
Right.
answers to the community. We're not here to form a foundation to purchase land. So if
No, this is the idea group, right?
and if the folks in the advisory group say, okay, this is how our poll comes back, and there is a huge group of people who really want to get together, this group can provide them any sort of information like this, who the people are, all of the nuances to what might have to happen in order for a recreational district to be formed, which is a legal entity, and how that would work. We're here to provide resources and information. If a group forms a foundation and finds ways to fund and do this, there is a Panhandle Parks Foundation. It still is in existence. A group could work with that. It's not their job to go out and solicit funds to buy parks, but it's a foundation that can hold monies for groups and organizations. That's my understanding. If any of you know anything different about their charter, but there are some starting points if there's a group of people who really want to get together and put this together, we can certainly put them in contact with the resources they need to do that. So that's kind of, does anyone else on the working group, based on what we've done, have anything more to add as far as what this analysis has given us and what resources are available to the public if they wanted to move forward with this conversation? David?
I'm not sure if this is helpful or not, but I'll just throw it out there for you. One of the things that made Boulder County's open space program work well after they were up and running and they had established years of regular income is that they had on staff environmentalists and real estate professionals who would look at a map like Hillary and sorry, I just had brain lock. Our other cohort came up. Melissa, thank you, Melissa. I'm getting up. These professionals would look at a map like that and then map out a strategy of which lands they wanted to acquire. Because in that case, Boulder County was in the business of buying land because they passed an open space tax for that purpose. So they had professionals doing analysis of what to buy first, second, third, fourth, fifth, all based on a strategy for a long-term goal. Just background information for you to know. Not suggesting that's useful here, but just thought you might like to know.
Kiki, were there any other maps? You want me to scroll through the other maps for the group to see the results? We'll certainly post these on the KMPO webpage as well for everyone to see.
Sorry, I got
Okay.
bumped out of the meeting and had to rejoin. So
That's what I
Oh.
wondered. Okay.
Bummer.
that little click right there, and
I
I
hate
am
that.
not sure how that happened. My Bluetooth on my other, I have 3 cell phones, so inexcusable, but one of them was not on do, and it grabbed my Bluetooth and took me away. So anyway, what I was saying is that since we record this meeting and we put the link to YouTube of the meeting, so all this information that we're talking about will be available, correct?
That is correct.
And
Yep.
so I don't know if we can link the map and the list separately, but they're available by the screenshot. So anyone can take a look at that at any point. So I think, David, that was good. That was good. It was helpful information on how that worked. A lot of these conversations have been floated and as I said, we're here to continually keep the resources out here and information of what has been done and pulling back and how it can be explored and utilized in our community. So another thing, I'm going to continue to stay in touch with some of these contacts, and as things change in some of these other communities, and even the ones you mentioned, I may make some calls and just start putting some updates if there's new useful tools that we can explore. So we'll continue to do that.
Kiki, if I can jump in quickly, one
Please.
of the things I remember about Lakewood is they actually were doing building permit limitations when I still worked for Boulder County, which was over 13 years ago. So they kind of pioneered the path in the Denver metro area. And I think they've been working on it ever since then. And it's gone through various iterations. And the one that's in front of what you've read about recently, one of the big differences is that percentage notion you brought up.
Right.
Whereas before it was just an absolute cap.
Mm-hmm.
And so surely there's someone on Lakewood staff that knows the history of this. They may even have their own little paper about it.
Yeah, and I had a call in there that I got to their building people, and that's how I got some permitting information and where they were, but I have not talked with their planner people yet. So
Okay.
I'm going to do that because I think they're the ones that would have the history of that. And so they're on my to-do list to get a hold of them, and was going to see how this meeting went today to see if we want to keep moving forward with some of that. We're kind of jumping all over from prairie to building to housing to, and that's kind of how this always goes, but that's fine as well. So anything else on this, the prairie map and the data and the analysis that we have? I think that what we've given to this group is that if they decide at the end of this meeting, when we do some live polling, that they want us to continue working on collaborative efforts with preserving the prairie, then what we need to do is put any other tools that we find that regionally could work, including updates on what Panhandle Parks Foundation's capabilities are, and then see if there is a movement for some organization to step forward to say we're willing to start talking about formalizing a funding placeholder to have a conversation actually start with the property owner. So I think that summarizes where we're at with that, and we'll see how the polling question goes at the end.
And Kiki, before you move on, there are a few comments in the chat box that I don't think we've addressed all those.
Were they public so everyone could see them?
Questions, yes, I think that they were all went to the two, or to all the attendees and the panelists too. I know we've mentioned David's white paper previously. There was a comment asking about that. Also, there was a comment asking about why not eliminate the shared tier altogether and just set end boundaries in it'd be ACI, the area of city impact, so that each city knows where they will be. And we have had discussions. That is one of the components under this, I guess, this topic we're discussing right now, in terms of should we be looking at our area of city impact agreements again, renegotiating those with the county and the other cities. David, I don't know if you want to weigh in on that. I know the working group thought that if there's interest in preservation of prairie land, that's more time sensitive. So that was kind of the focus of.
I was thinking
if
there's anything we could move quickly on, it would be the ACIs, because we are all part of that. And if there's any receptivity to the notion of a master ACI, so we could quit dinking around with individual, Hayden has theirs and Hauser has theirs and Coeur d'Alene has theirs, and then we have these shared tiers. If it made sense in critical parts of the county to just say, we're going to do a master ACI that locks everybody in all at once. I know it would take more time up front, but I believe it would save us time in the long run. Just planting the seed for discussion.
And I think we did talk about that at the previous meeting, and we talked about it at 2 work group meetings, where that would fall in the priority list. And as David said, based on the poll, and we're trying to be sensitive to what the public is telling us, what the people want us to do, we moved with most of our effort being focused on what can happen on the prairie. And I think we put out some good information on that. So I would say at our next work group meeting, we have a solid discussion on the ACI, move that back onto the agenda, and have a solid discussion on how that would work, how long it would take, and what the next steps of that would be. So let's plan on that. If we're all okay, or does anyone see some objective or something in the way of us doing that on the next work group agenda?
Oh, that sounds like a good plan. I
Okay.
think most of these other comments have been addressed. I don't want to delay us in moving to the next agenda, but I also don't want the advisory group members to feel like we didn't see their
Okay.
comments. So I think we had, let's see, I don't know if Melissa was able to rejoin, but we can look at the spreadsheet. So there's a question about how many total acres there are in the prairie available for development today. So we'll have to check that part of that. And I think there's another comment from Len Crosby clarifying that the land that the city of Post Falls owns, and that's true of Ratham as well, as for land application of the treated wastewater effluent. So that's not available for development. So we'd have to subtract those acreages out from the total acreage. So I'll see if we have that and we can share that with the group. I think, Sean, did you see anything else in the chat that you hadn't addressed or that we haven't brought up?
The only thing I saw, Ed asked if David could talk about the white paper, Ramapo and Petaluma, but I'm not sure to what degree or what.
What do they want to know? The synopsis or what?
I think I had an item I was going to bring up when we're talking about these school subcommittees. There's a lot of these questions that come up, and the entire advisory group isn't really well aware of what that means, Petaluma and whatever. But I think that as what we need to do is, if that's a frequently asked question that needs to be added to our frequently asked questions list, as I said in the beginning, please email me and say, this is my question. And we will add it so that there's some context to the question, why it's being asked. And then the people who are reading it have a better comprehension of, instead of just an answer to what it means, then here we have a summary that explains it with the answer to the question. So I'd appreciate it if anyone in the advisory group or their memberships has a question like that you would send it to us so that we can add it to the frequently asked questions page and put some context around it. I think that makes sense.
That would be more meeting efficient.
Yeah.
Sean was sending me a note that explained what the person was looking for. It's basically a quick synopsis and could it be implemented here? That would take me longer than you want to know.
Yeah, and that's where I said, I really love to do that. I want to answer the question, but
we could do that on,
it would,
electronic.
one answer could take the whole hour. So
Right.
that's what we want to do.
That's
So
something I can circle back around.
And then I'll make sure, in fact, I'm writing them down. So I'm going to follow up to make sure I get them answered, and then we can post them there. So that'll be great. So let's move on to the next item. I think we've answered those. Is part number 2. We had the polling question, and I'm just going to touch base with you really quickly on this. There was an agreement to form a subcommittee to address some of the school growth impacts that have come out of, that's what folks wanted us to do. That the school districts, and they requested adding Jerry Keene to that group, and there probably will be some others. They are have not met yet. We will be facilitating that as soon as they are all able to do that. They've had just addressed some comments that impact fees would take a state law revision. And this group, as far as the polls came back, was not interested in pursuing legislation as a high level priority. One of the other things that had come up during some of those conversations was initiating a real estate transaction tax like Washington does. That also would require statewide legislation. So it's not at this point just that nugget of information that subcommittee will get together, and those are just 2 little things that they will be discussing I would assume in the early on, and hopefully answer those questions. Those things are regarding schools is another huge arena to dive into, but it would require experts in that field that are willing to push through something on a state level that can be utilized locally. So that's what's happening there. Any quick questions on that one? So then we're up to Glenn, and Glenn, I last time we ran out of time and tabled the transportation traffic discussion, and I only have prioritization poll at the end of our meeting today. So Glenn, if you have something ready to share, unmute and we'll be ready to go.
Okay. So one of the things that we've been trying to do is get around to different community groups and talk about the transportation system and kind of where we're at and what we can expect. So what I thought I'd do is kind of go through a real quick part of this, and I think I hit the wrong button, but let's see if we can make this happen. So there's a lot of things going on now that you've seen going on. I'm not going to go through all those. I think what most people are interested in is kind of how we go about our business. And one of the things I wanted to bring up was the fact that our work is based on data, and it's data that is driven by not only what's occurred in the past, but what we also see happening into the future. We're required to take a look at, just a minute here, see if we'll do it this way. Anyway, we're required to take a look by federal statute out 20 years into the future, and nobody has a good crystal ball of what's going to happen out 20 years. So we rely on taking a look at trends and data that has occurred over the last, actually we've looked back from 1960 through the decades of what's been going on, and what we found is that there's not too surprising about where we're going, because we've seen these growth patterns in the past. We seem to have these waves of growth and then stabilization and waves of growth again. So based on that, we take a look at where we're at. One thing I'd want to point out is that we're running on a legacy transportation system. The last time the major investments occurred were in the late 60s and early 70s, about the time all of those items you see on the screen. And it's getting tired, and it's not meeting our current needs. Irregardless of whether there's growth in the future, our transportation system has some challenges. This is a history of our growth that's been going on since 1970 compared to the United States and to the state of Idaho. And this has been our history of growth over the last basically 50 years. And you can see that it's gone up and down, but overall it's been about just over 3%. And based on this data, we expect that by 2040, we'll have about 304,000 people in Kootenai County. So our challenge is that we have a system performance and resiliency and reliability problem that's become a big issue. When you see 95 as it is now, or on I-90, those are issues that are not going to go away, whether there's growth or not. So we have some system challenges on Interstate 90. We have system challenges on Northwest Boulevard, Government Way, US 95, Prairie, and some others are about to have issues. Looks like we're going to address the needs on 41 for probably 15 to 20 years. But one of the things that happens is that when we see an incident occur, and this was on the Cougar Gulch Hill, the challenge is that you've got a detour of 67 miles if you go into Washington, or 102 miles if you stay in Idaho. And those are the types of things similar to I-90, where this pickup burned up and they closed the eastbound I-90, and then people started jumping into the median to cause problems. So what we see by 2040 is I-90 needs widened, Government Way has challenges, 4th has challenges, Ramsey, US 95, And this is based on what we consider to be a pretty reasonable projection of growth. Some people say, well, you're just pro-growth, and I would suggest to you that we're proactive. Because most transportation projects take between 10 and 15 years to go from the time that you identify a need that you can actually get it through the process of programming it and getting it designed and getting the right of way and getting it constructed. So in order to try and stay close to the curve, we have to be looking out 20 years so we can be better prepared. In terms of our 6 big 5 regional projects, I-90 to 6 lanes from state line to Sherman, the state legislature and the ITD board just approved a project that they'll begin that 6-laning process where they'll go from Post Falls to Coeur d'Alene in the next couple of years. Build out of the Hutter Corridor from I-90 to 53. The ITD board has also provided funding for that now. Relocating the I-90 port of entry to the McGuire Road area rather than where it's at right now at the Hutter Rest area. Putting together a regional traffic management center, so when there's an incident, there's a better way to manage it than just kind of wait for it to happen and then go away. And then also the US 95 bridge over the Coeur d'Alene River, or the Spokane River in Coeur d'Alene, with the amount of growth that's going on, not just here, but in terms of traffic on US 95, that's probably a bridge that's going to need some improvements in the not too distant future. Overall, we see because of the lack of investment in our transportation system since 1970, we see this is almost 1.5 billion, so $1,470 million, with a lot of projects that need to be done. And I would suggest to you that a lot of this is trying to address the issues that have occurred since 1970, as opposed to just waiting and to try and build something for the future. It's really to try and catch up with where we're at, and then also provide some margin for the future. To give you a glimpse of what $1.4 billion looks like, that would be the Gerald Desmond Bridge that connects the 2 ports in LA. That bridge alone was $1.4 billion. The last transportation package was 5 cents. Those funds were dedicated for exclusively for state and local road and bridge maintenance and replacement projects. You could not use it to widen a road like the one up on Prairie, where we have a piece from Meyer to 41. They're bringing 41 to 4-lane divided highway, and yet Prairie still will be a 2-lane country road from Meyer to 41 until we can get it funded, probably in 5 years. Idaho, the Idaho legislature in North Idaho, in the last package, 9 people voted no and 3 voted yes for that transportation package, which makes it a challenge to get additional funding. The Idaho legislature this session increased the amount of sales tax revenue to transportation to 4.5%. That 4.5% of which generates about $83 million a year. 4 million goes to local jurisdictions and 80 million will go to the Idaho Transportation Department. The goal under the legislation is to bond that money, which will be about $1.4 billion. And that they have a list of transportation projects they'll be spending that on. So locally, just so you get a sense of the dollars, the Idaho Highway User Revenue account generates about $476 million a year. The local jurisdictions in Kootenai County collectively get $13 million of that, or 2.73%. When you split it then between the 4 highway districts and the cities, it starts trickling down pretty quick as to what's available through the Highway User Revenue account. As a result, many jurisdictions then have to rely on their general property tax levies or their sales tax revenues or their general fund in order to do transportation improvements in their communities. So that's kind of the quick and down and dirty about transportation. Like I said, we spend a lot of time trying to look at where those priorities need to be. One of the items I wanted to bring up was the discussion about public transportation. Unlike many states, public transportation in Idaho is not supported by the state of Idaho or the legislature. They do have what's called a public transportation benefit aid authority, or a regional public transportation agency. They modeled it after the state of Washington, which has a public transportation benefit area authority. Spokane Transit actually is a PTBA. But the Idaho legislature left out a chapter of that code, which was the funding code. And so they say you can create the agency, you can create a board of directors to run a public transportation agency, but we're not going to give you an opportunity to go to the public for a vote to support public transportation, unlike most other states. So the architecture is there, but the financing mechanism is not. And so public transportation now in the state of Idaho relies on the contribution of local cities and the county to match the federal aid dollars. And that's still a very limited amount of funds. In terms of non-motorized transportation, we encourage a lot of projects that are using federal aid funds to make sure that there are sidewalks, both that are ADA accessible, as well as where it makes sense to have a bike lane or something alongside it. We encourage that those be incorporated into the design of those projects. So that's kind of where I'm at.
Hey, Glenn.
Yeah.
This is Sean, City of Coeur d'Alene. Ed asked, are those North Idaho reps voting nay?
Out of the 12 in the last gas tax increase, 9 North Idaho legislators voted no.
And I think there was another question that was asked as well. Maybe Sean, you can scroll through the chat box and have any questions that Glenn is able to answer.
There was one from Lynn Crosby. It asked, don't we need some legislative guardrails to have ITD focus more on funding on areas experiencing major growth?
Well, guardrails are always great. But right now, the way the funding mechanism is set up in Idaho, even with ITD, that the legislature approves the budget, and then the Idaho Transportation Board is the one that actually does the prioritization and selection of those projects. And that's true whether it's state tax revenue or the federal funds that come to the state of Idaho. I think the current ITD board has done a pretty good job and has a little bit different outlook on transportation than we've seen in the past. Their jumpstart on several projects with this funding, the fact that they're going to be dumping, in the $100 million range of funds onto Interstate 90 to get it widened, and a lot of efforts over the next 3-4 years to support transportation investments. They recognize that the 3 fastest growing counties in the state of Idaho are Ada County and Canyon County, which make up somewhere around 700,000 people in the state of Idaho. And then Kootenai County is number 3. And if you add those 3 together, they represent about 50% of the population of the state of Idaho. And I think that has gotten the Idaho Transportation Board's attention.
Good. Thank you. Appreciate that, Glenn, and I appreciate putting all that together. If there's any further questions that come up, please email me. I will get that information to Glenn and make sure that if there's some follow-up that needs to be done, we can post it under the FAQs again, and we'll make sure that that stuff is there.
So Kiki,
So,
there's what, it's okay. I would like to mention one other thing. Is we worked very closely with the local jurisdictions in the development of the comprehensive land use plans. We worked with the city of Hayden, we worked with the city of Coeur d'Alene and Post Falls. So where we place population employment is directly related to what the jurisdictions are doing in their comprehensive planning process. So I just want people to understand that we're not just kind of off doing our own thing. We're working collaboratively with the local jurisdictions and the county and ITD to make sure that we're kind of giving the best guess of what traffic's going to be in the future based on what those plans are.
Great. Thanks, Glenn.
You bet.
We've got about 10 minutes left. And Hillary, I think what we wanted to do, I just want to review with this group and make sure I'm on track that we have put on our next agenda item, the discussion about ACIs. We are going to discuss at our working group if we want to incorporate presenters into this advisory group so we get more information on some of these topics. And that then we want to update the FAQs, and that will be on our agenda for the next working group meeting, just so that everyone involved knows what direction we're heading. And then we need to now kind of take a quick moment and ask our advisory board, our advisory group members to advise us. How do we want to do that? Hillary, do you want to talk about the live poll?
Yes, but it looks like there was one question that came in that Glenn would like to answer live, if we can do that before the poll.
Please,
Okay.
Glenn.
Sure. The question was about the use of design build to see if they can make these projects, these transportation projects, which are very expensive, less expensive. Design build may or may not actually make a project less expensive, but design build will typically get it done in a shorter time frame, and therefore there is some cost savings because of the cost of the value of money over time. But ITD actually has done design build or worked in conjunction with local jurisdictions on design build projects in the state of Idaho.
Great. Great, thanks. Appreciate the question. So Hillary, should we do, I wanted also for this working group, I wanted to share that we're individually, these cities are tackling things that are specific to their own jurisdiction that really aren't something that affects the entire region yet. For example, I had mentioned that Coeur d'Alene is taking a look at their short-term rental ordinances. And we are, I think staff is moving forward to do a review, as that's kind of a new ordinance for Coeur d'Alene. It has been around a long time, to find out if we are having any kind of a negative effect on the rental market, or if we need to look at caps or ownership, or how that works and what's happening in our city. And there isn't any preconceived notion as to what is going on, but that's just one of the things that Coeur d'Alene is doing regarding growth and housing that is specific to us. So we're going to talk about polling our advisory group members now. And I'm going to remind them again that it's very important that they go back to their organizations and their cities and the folks that they're representing and share what's going on in this group. That's the only way we're going to be able to get citizen feedback and move forward what the community wants us to do. So please, if you don't understand, contact me. If you have another question, email me. We want to answer those and make sure we're being clear and transparent and working together. So polling questions that you had ready. And then when we're done with the polling questions, if any of you in your cities have something that you want to share that's going on specifically, that's a real quick in your group, then please do that after we're done with the poll. So question one is, what is your now to the advisory group? What is your top priority, again, for us to move forward? This was the order that I think besides traffic, these are the items that are on our working agenda. So if we can just do a live poll and have the advisory group, are we doing this in pick one or prioritize them, Hillary?
Top priority, so just one.
Okay, so what is the top priority right now from our advisory group to have us present at the next advisory group meeting? And let's hope it's working.
It's working. We about 45% have voted.
While you're, I guess maybe I should have gotten more into local worker housing partnerships, which I think we've talked about with this group. And that is one of the items that's going to be on our upcoming work group agenda. And that's something that is going to be an ongoing discussion on how we can work with a bunch of different organizations to put together some sideboards that, again, will allow people who are serving our community, firefighters, teachers, nurses, city planners, I don't know, the ability to find a way to live in the town in which they work.
Another thing on that point, Kiki, so we've been having some conversations too about maybe looking at a regional housing assessment. So Coeur d'Alene receiving our community development block grant funds, we have to do our own city housing needs assessment, but we've talked about broadening that and working together with the jurisdictions that are part of this partnership and doing more of a regional housing assessment and looking at possible grant funding assistance from the Realtors Association and maybe AARP. So just a side note that there are some other things being discussed in the background as well.
Good, thank you. And we'll talk some more about that at our work group and put our meeting notes about that out on the website too.
Great, okay, so we're about 70% of the people have voted. So I think we're probably good. Let me end that because I think that's all the attendees. I opened it up this time to the panelists, but I don't know that any panelist is opting to vote. So would you like me to end it and share the results?
That would be great.
Okay. All right, here are the results. If you can see that on your screens.
So it looks like, as everyone in the advisory and working group should be able to see it on the screen, the local worker housing partnerships concept did come in as #1 vote getter. So we will move that up onto our work group agenda and address that and report back to the advisory group at our next meeting on that topic. And did we have another polling question?
We do. It's coming up now. Okay, that one's on the screen.
Great. And this is one that I want to put some context around this before you all vote. Obviously, we had a huge response on our last public poll, and we want to do, we want the community input, but we do have issues because obviously we had a lot of people who were from out of the area. We don't have a way to track by URL where they're coming from. And so how should we determine the priorities for the working group? We need information from the advisory group. Can you talk to your constituents, your membership, and ask, do you want to have a regular poll come out? Do we want to do mass public polling? Should we have the advisory group member be the one who does advise this working group on what the next steps are? So give that some thought for a second here, and then let us know what you want to do. I'm happy to take emails on suggestions from any of you on how we can do more public outreach. As you all know, we do this through comp plans. We do this through many public outreach tools that each of the jurisdictions have. What we want to do is get a more finite result from your opinion on how we should prioritize what the working group does. We spend quite a bit of time on this. It's important, but we don't want to be getting off track with bad data. So please let us know with this live poll question what your thoughts are, and then feel free to follow up with an email.
The votes are trickling in. It looks like we're getting a few more responses now. So we'll just wait a few more minutes. Okay, if anyone else wants to vote, get your vote in, please, and then we'll end the poll and share the results. Okay, well, it is almost tied up. One additional vote for the advisory group rankings.
Wow. Okay, based on that, we're going to use the advisory group rankings now. What I am going to ask is that all of you do email me some thoughts. Most of you have been involved in businesses and organizations that have done some sort of surveys, and we have limited tools at our disposal right now, but I certainly want to make sure we do everything we can to get the public's input involved and put those questions out with a good context surrounding them. And hopefully maybe we can utilize the newspaper and some of their online services and podcasts, things like that, in a more efficient manner. So I will do some research with that, but please let me know what your thoughts, since the poll came in that way. We'll use the advisory group right now. And since they had advised us to discuss the local worker housing concept, that will be the #1 work group agenda item. ACI, discussing presenters, talking about the regional housing assessment and how that will affect this working group and the community, are the 4 agenda items I have that the working group will be discussing in 2 weeks. I'll be doing some research in the middle of between now and then in order to get that agenda ready. Did the panelists have any other items that I should have included as letting folks know we're going to have that on our agenda?
The one you mentioned before, Kiki, was updating the FAQs, and I don't know if that's an
Right.
agenda item or if it's maybe just letting the
I
advisory
think-
group know when we have updated that.
I think that the updating the FAQs is really directed towards the advisory group. But if you have questions out there, you need to give them to us. And if we get them, we'll make that part of the agenda work to have them properly answered. So that's really where that is. But yes, we'll want to leave that on our agenda. That it seems like there was another item that we were going to talk about. Nope, that was an FAQ item. I had that there. It's 4:01, and we have a ton of mileage to cover in an hour each time, and a lot of work in between. But I think we've answered everyone's questions. And if not, please email me. And our next work group meeting will have a Zoom come out to the panelists, and we will have this agenda posted out there and be discussing these items. And then the calendar will be posted on KMP website when the next advisory group is, but it will be a month from now. Is that right? And
Yes, correct.
so that will be on a Monday, 4 weeks from now. So
June
a Zoom link
28th.
will come out June 28th.
Yes.
Anything else that you folks wanted to share real briefly before we leave? And Mike Hill, if you would please drop me a line as to who the presenter was that presented to Rathdrum on the parks, the recreational parks concept, I'd appreciate that.
We'll do that shortly.
Thank you. Anyone else have anything to share?
Not for me.
I'm
Great.
good. Thank you.
I think Hayden but I think Melissa had to leave. I think they're having a town hall meeting coming up. Not sure about that. So you might want to check calendars for that information. I don't know if anyone else has any other public outreach activities going on. Okay, anyway, thank you all. Advisory group, I truly appreciate your being engaged and involved and your questions. And please email me any updates, FAQs, questions, and we will see you again in a month. Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.